Service Center in Cottage Grove, Minnesota. We would like to acknowledge that the land in which we gather is the land of the Mdewakanton Dakota people. Mdewakanton means dwellers of the Spirit Lake. The first item on our agenda is roll call. Dana?
Louise Hines is absent. Ryan Clark.
Here.
Sharon Van Leer.
Here.
Eric Tessmer. Melinda Doles. Here. Simi Petniak.
Here.
Tea Alvarenga.
Here.
Andrew Shaston.
Here.
Matilda Samuel.
Here.
Katie Schwartz.
Here. 2.0, Pledge of Allegiance, please stand. Okay, 3.0 is the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Sharon.
Second.
Okay, second by Ryan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. 4.0 is our student board representative reports, and that will be introduced by Superintendent Julie Nielson.
Thank you. Ooh, Andrew. Andrew, I have your microphone tonight. Andrew was just reminding me that he was really loud the last time and don't hold it so close. So Andrew, I have your mic if you want to use it. I'm excited to introduce our student board reps again. What I asked the students to do is to just share 3 things that were happening at their schools and or that they're part of. So they're going to take time to do that. But it's also an opportunity having students on the school board to talk about just process and procedure. So this past week, we talked about what items might come to the school board as a first reading, and then why we would send something to the business meeting for a final reading or an approval. And so like our calendar tonight, we know that's a first reading. Policies are always a first reading with final approval at the board. So we continue to work through leadership opportunities with our students as they learn more about the work of our school board. So starting us off tonight will be Taya.
Hi everyone, I'm Taya. I go to Park. I wasn't here last meeting, so hi, nice to meet everyone. My 3 topics that I'm going to talk about for Park, the things that are going on, is 1, our winter sports are starting on Monday, so for me that's basketball, so I'm really excited. My second thing is that I'm a National Honor Society, and yesterday was our election for officers, so everyone that was interested in running for officer got to do a little speech, and the students got to vote, so I think that's something fun for us. And then my third thing is that an athlete from each winter sport was invited to go on a field trip to Cretan, and I was one of them, I was the representative for basketball. Us and other athletes from the district were included in a leadership seminar, so I thought that was really fun. I thought it was very applicable not only to my sports, but just to my student life. And yeah, thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew. I'm going to be talking a bit more about mechanical stuff that's happened more at Eastridge, more about construction. Construction process has been going pretty smoothly so far. It's going by very fast, truly. They've gotten by very fast, and I thought they would. Moving on, I would like to talk about a new procedure we've implemented at Eastridge that we've talked about with the cabinet at Eastridge. We implemented a procedure that Woodbury and Park have implemented about new online locations and new kind of safety regulations on keeping students out of the hallways during school hours, or more of non-passing time, I should say, which just puts more seniors and juniors in the cafeteria until our old business pod will be turned into that online location, and our sophomores and freshmen are in the media center at the time. And it's worked so far. And then lastly, I would just like to talk about our theater program. At the Loft Stage, the Matilda play will be hosted from 7 to 9 p.m. Friday through Sunday. If anyone would like to go see it, I'm going to try to as well. But they put a lot of work into it. I'm very proud of them.
Okay, so my 3 things are kind of going all across the board. So firstly, also about a musical happening at our school. We're on week 2 of the Mean Girls musical. There's 3 more showings. One of them's today, and then Friday and Saturday, both at 7 p.m. And they've done a great job. I'm hoping that I can see it soon, but I'm not too sure. And then the second thing is the early action deadline for seniors. It recently passed for most schools on November 1st, and a lot of seniors have been working on college applications and really had that on their plate. And then the third thing is our Latino Student Union. They have a show coming up called Roots. It's on November 14th. It's at 6 p.m. and it's their second annual show for their club. So it's great. I think you guys should all see it if you can.
And so thank you to our students. They represent a nice balance across our 3 high schools. And one of the things I've also asked them with their packets in front of them, I'm not going to ask them to go online, but to actually take notes. And so there may be opportunities where they don't ask questions out loud, but we will do some debriefing behind the scenes as it relates to leadership. So thank you, students, for being here.
Thank you all. Okay, we will move on to 5.0, and that is our workshop items. We do have 2 this evening. We will start with 5.1, and that is a strategic plan update, and that will be presented by Julie Nielson, Superintendent.
Thank you. Kind of like construction, the strategic plan is going quickly as well. When I think back, and people around the table, it was 2022 when we first embarked on creating a new strategic plan. If you recall, we adopted a classroom to boardroom process that focused on desired daily experiences, with that final strategic plan sheet actually being the work of the board, and I will be showing that here in just a minute. We had well over 100 staff members, community members, and individuals involved in the creation of this. We received input from our district student ambassadors, community members, and parent advisory groups. And as we begin year 3, we'd like to focus a little bit more on that district vision card. And board members behind the scenes got to see the very complex look at all of the data and the desired daily experiences, as well as just taking a look at what students, staff, and families shared as it relates to those desired daily experiences. So our outcome for the presentation, we'll take a look at the roadmap. As I said, we'll talk about the district vision card, and then finally, we're going to share the big work that supports better meeting our measures on the district vision card. All right, board members, this should look familiar to you because this is actually the document that you approved. So the board approved the final 5 core values, which are listed in the center: connections, integrity, equity, excellence, and innovation. You'll see the mission statement at the top. I believe that 100% of our system leaders would be able to recite what our mission statement is. And the first thing about being able to implement is people need to know it and feel it. And I would say that 100% across the board, people know that we're here to educate students for success. The bottom area I just want to draw your attention to is really where the work lies. If you take a look at the first 3 buckets, the student experience, mastery of learning and expectations, student pathways and supports, that really gets at our students and instruction. That includes a lot of different perception data, along with the data of our MAP testing, our early entrance to our kindergarten data, our ACT, SAT scores, and that really combines everything in the first 3 buckets. The 4th bucket is operations and staffing, which you'll see some measures in that area, as well as that opportunity to engage and connect with our community. So let's take a look at our vision card. I call this, I don't know, sometimes I call it a moldy burger or something because it's kind of like a hamburger. Every time I present, I say something different, so I always look at Shawn, and he's looking at me like, what are you going to say this time? You know, part of it looks like a burger because it's sandwiched with the 2 blue pieces, but that really is the sandwich and the bread is really that desired daily experiences. And those experiences of staff, students, and families, they were created with staff, students, and families. I would say probably in the next 2 to 3 years, that's all information that we will want to go back and review and maybe update. But for the time being, we don't want to be moving that a lot during these opening years. You'll see sandwiched in between there our vision statement and mission statement, along with those what we call strategic directions, or those 5 buckets of work. So our vision card. Our vision card reports key measures and metrics for strategic planning, and it helps us assess the progress that we're making as a district. When we take a look at the measurements all the way from intervention to vision achieved, what we're looking for as a district to be at that point where we say we're continuing to make progress and we've achieved our vision. And so to that end, it's important to understand those data sources. And with board members, we have talked about this, and sometimes there's confusion because people are wondering, like, why just those grade levels, or that's not enough people. And so just to take a look at what we've used as the basis. So, and what I mean by that is, what surveys are we already doing? So as a district, we already conduct the Minnesota Student Survey. Students, have you been part of the Minnesota Student Survey? Okay. So Minnesota Student Survey is always conducted grade 5, 8, 9, and 11. So we have data points from that particular survey. You can see that with those groupings of students, we had about 80% response rate. The second survey that we use is our Morris-Leatherman survey, and that's the survey that as a district we have conducted every 3 years. But that talks about the finances of the district, the culture and climate of the district, but that's another kind of consistent survey. The third area that is very consistent would be our assessment data. It's our MAP data, our MCA data, so all of that data is known as well. Then we fill in the gaps with what we call our South Washington County survey. We conducted a survey with students, with families, and with staff members. And one might ask, like, how did you select the questions that were asked? If questions were not asked on the Minnesota Student Survey or on the Morris-Leatherman survey, then we knew somewhere we had to get that information from students, staff, or family members. And so hence, we created our own South Washington County Schools survey. And so you'll be able to see up there the reason it was grade 5 through 12. We felt like those were the students that would give us the perceptions that were looking to answer those specific questions. Earlier grades would probably not understand. So grades 5 through 12 for students. You can see we only had 1,763 respondents for community. Not a huge number. But again, we use this as perception data to take a look at trends over time and what people are saying. And again, staff members, about 54% across all bargaining groups. And we did have a large turnout in terms of staff responses from our teacher bargaining group. All right, when we think about our vision card, it is that continuum of requiring intervention, like we need intervention. And I think as our curriculum teams, I'm looking back here onto my side, as our curriculum teams presented the reading and math data, we know that in the area of reading and math, we know that we're in that area of requiring intervention. And we're not shying away from that. We know that we have work to do. The next area up would be making progress. Then it would be continuous improvement, advancing toward vision, and vision achieved. And I'd like to say that I am the psychometrician behind all of the percentages, but we actually have Dr. Mao Jacobson, who has combed through all of the data to help us set up the percentages so that we can continue to monitor and move toward that vision achieved. Just to remind the staff and community, these are the 3 copies of, at that time in 2022, what students, staff, and families said they wanted from the school district. And one thing to note, someone said, you know, Julie, nowhere in the students and the families do they talk about learning outcomes or we want our kids to be proficient. That's correct. At that point in time, families, staff, and students did not talk about that academic portion, but we have absolutely included the academic portion underneath that mastery of learning. So on the next 3 slides, you're going to see the desired daily experiences in that left-hand column. Then you're going to see a couple of the survey questions that were asked, the level we're at, and what that response looked like. So if we look down that left-hand column for students, and these are exactly what students said that they wanted out of school. An experience at school to provide opportunities to prepare for the real world and explore options for future. You can see, and 2 questions were pulled, I can design my class schedule to help me be successful. You can see in that category, advancing toward vision, 82% responded almost, always, or often. In that same category, having experiences at school that prepare me for life after high school, advancing toward vision, 80% responded almost, always, or often. It's always important to keep in mind that when we do these surveys, this is all around student perception. And so we take the information they have, or they give, and that's how it's reported back out. The next area, desired daily experiences, I feel welcome, cared for, heard, valued, respected, and accepted for who I am among my peers and the staff. Two survey questions that monitored that at my school, teachers care about students. You can see from student perspective, they said vision achieved, 90% agree or strongly agree. I feel safe at school. That one landed in advancing toward vision, where 89% agree or strongly agree. And then the next one, sometimes you'll see that desired daily experience, and then that survey question is exactly the same. Sometimes we could do that, and other times it took more questions to get at that desired daily experience. So I can use my voice to include other people. You can see for that particular one, in terms of student perception, 91% of our students agree or strongly agree. And then the final one, I see my race, culture, and ability supported and acknowledged in the classroom and the curriculum, the staff, and throughout the school. And the question we took a look at it, how would you rate the performance of the teachers and instructional staff in our district? Advancing toward vision, 89% of our families responded with a rating of excellent to good. So what do our staff want? Again, on that left-hand side, you'll see our staff wants students and families are the center of our decision-making. I'm proud to work in South Washington County schools where I feel ownership, value, and am invested. I am thriving because of intentional focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I have opportunities to create relationships with colleagues, students, and families. I work and learn in spaces that are physically and emotionally safe, equitable, resourced, and welcoming. And so, again, those survey questions in the center, I'll just have you take a look at those. I don't need to read those, every single one of those, but those are the ones that align with what our staff wants. You're going to see that first one. I want to point out areas where we know we need improvement. So if we go to that area, the areas that talk about continuous improvement, decisions are made based on what's best for students and family. You can see while 72.2% agree or strongly agree that the category that places us in terms of our continuum is in that continuous improvement area. Also, opportunities at work to connect with families. We have continuous improvement in that area. That 79.1 agree or strongly agree. And then finally, we have additional progress to make. Do you have the resources and tools needed to do your job? And you will see that staff reported 77.3% agreed or strongly agreed. So again, another area that we can take a look at in terms of improvement. And then finally, what our families want. Our families had 3 big bullets on the desired daily experiences, and that is that opportunity to explore their individual interests, passions, and ideas, making sure they're aware of policies and procedures that are consistently applied across the district, and staff at my school are reflective of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And so as we look at those survey questions, I will just go to the second question. Has your child experienced personalized learning that aligns with their learning style? You can see that particular area making progress. 65.1% of parents that responded agreed or strongly agreed. This next one, while surprising because it's policy, and policy is not always that interesting, there still is some concern about district policy, knowing that every single meeting we have policies on, our board agendas, knowing we have a policy manual online, the transparency in terms of reviewing the policies. So again, from our parent perspective, how familiar are you with district policies and procedures? And while we don't go through those publicly many times, you can see that that's an area that, as a school district, it requires intervention. So thinking about how might we communicate, how might we engage, 47.1% of our families agreed or strongly agreed that they were aware. So that leaves well over 50% that aren't aware. And then how familiar are you with tools and supports to communicate with schools? And that one actually was in the requires intervention, 52.5% agree or strongly agree. And so that's an area as well as we work with families that we can certainly improve. And then staff at my school reflect Black, Indigenous, and people of color. The first question actually is right from our human resources, and that was 9.69, so that was actually a piece of data. And then from the perspective of our parents and families, there are staff members from diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds that fell in continuous improvement at 73.6% agreeing or strongly agreeing. And then how will we know we're successful? One of the things with our strategic plan is making sure that we have things written down. As people come and go, move in and out, we want to make sure that we have procedures, our policies are annually reviewed, and we have handbooks and implementation maps that really lay out the work that we're doing so that the next person or people that come after us don't have to recreate, that they can just pick things up with process and procedure and move the system forward. Which gets into then having our district vision card, which leads to improved student outcomes and educating students for success. So I want to highlight just those 5 buckets of work, because when you take a look at the next slides, those really are the areas that we are focused on and have been focused on. We're really working to keep the target as the target, meaning we're not going out and looking for brand new initiatives. We really want to make sure that we perfect the work that we're doing. So our 5 strategic priority areas again, and as I shared, 1, 2, and 3 really revolve around student learning, and 4 and 5, of course, operations and engagement and partnerships. So let's take a look at our big work, and around the table we have leaders that help lead in some of these areas, so if there are any questions, we certainly are happy to answer those. But as you're aware, board, and thanks to last year with our opportunity for professional development, just our continued focus on literacy, and I say continued, literacy is an everyday, all the time thing. This week we had our paraprofessionals being trained, and so you can see the end of the year outcome is that we will have training completed for our paraprofessionals. Some of the highest quality training that I believe our paraprofessionals have ever received. And not just great learning for them as paraprofessionals, but if they have younger children, wow, what an asset to help support their own children. We have implementation of a K-12 identification. We've talked about that screening process for literacy interventions, and making sure that the learning that occurred last year through the READ Act is being transferred and applied in the classroom. And all of that work, the literacy work, is being done through our teaching and learning department and our curriculum review cycle. The next one, we get into that acronym, Shawn, and as I see that up there, like, there's that MTSS thing. And like outside people are like, what's MTSS? It's the framework for supporting students, whether that be in an intervention, whether that be in enrichment, it's a framework. And so as part of our MTSS, our framework work, we have an identification of our guaranteed viable curriculum. That means having priority benchmarks and resources, meaning regardless of which elementary school or middle school you go to and whichever class you're taking, if it's the same class, that we can expect the benchmarks and resources to be the same or very similar. The third area, focus on consistent delivery of the core curriculum. We know that when we're talking about the need for students to have interventions when they're behind, that when we see a high percentage of students that aren't achieving at a particular level, that we know we need to go back and fix what we call the core curriculum. And the core curriculum is our regular curriculum that's taught in every single classroom, that all students should have access to, including students who may qualify for special education. So you can see underneath that delivery of the core curriculum, what we're looking for at the end of the year in our focus is that we have consistent PLCs in place throughout the district. And PLC stands for a professional learning community. That really, those are our teachers and teacher teams coming together to talk about students, to talk about learning, to talk about assessments, and to say which students are getting it, which students are not, and what do we need to do to circle back. The fourth one, I think there's a lot of excitement around the table, and that is our new data warehousing system called EduClimber. EduClimber, everybody has a little bit different pronunciation for it. And that one, of course, fits underneath student pathways and support, but you could see completed intentional and foundational training for staff, and now we're actually at the point where staff are beginning to go in and utilize it. What is great about this system is it allows us to take multiple measures and pull them all into one database, and we've never had that as a school district, so it's going to be really, really cool and great for our teachers as we take a look at student performance. The next one, again, another really exciting area, career pathways through community involvement. I'm looking at Christine because just this week we had a community partnership meeting, and it was very well attended thanks to our chambers, our CTE teachers, but it's really working with our community partners, our staff, to determine what placements might we have for students to go outside and engage with actual businesses and companies within our own communities. So you'll see a comprehensive project plan and guiding change document focus on expanding those career pathways and opportunities. And then I think the last bullet point addresses the meeting we had this week, a cross-sector partnership meeting. And it was really great to take a look at the circle. It was multiple layers, but to take a look at those pathways that as a school district we provide for students. Next one, Kris is down there smiling because we just did True Time in her department in Human Resources, but now we are exploring something called Skyward Q. And if I could share with the board and with our community, while a lot of investment has gone to our classrooms, and sometimes to that end, some of the systems that run all of the operations need continued work. And Skyward Q is one of those. It's that alignment, it's that behind the scenes, it's taking care of finance and HR and student information. So updating those systems so that they're secure, that they can operate and talk to each other. So we're not always downloading information to move it over here, to insert it this way. So this system right now is in the research phase. And so Kris and her team in Human Resources are taking a look at what the current program does and what something like Skyward Q would move us toward. Many Minnesota school districts are already using Skyward Q. I'm not going to say that we're behind. We've had other priorities, but this is certainly a direction that we need to keep moving. And then to close out, many of you, if you work outside of education, you're familiar with the implementation of Minnesota Paid Leave. Just all the logistics, and that work is being done by our human resource team. They have shared information with system leaders. We know that we're coming up on that January 1st timeline. And then what they will continue to do throughout the year is to review usage and feedback to make any necessary adjustments and guide how we move forward with the Minnesota Paid Leave Act. The next area of big work is My Ride K-12 app. And it may seem like a while, but we have most of our kids now carrying their little bus passes to get on and scan, which has been invaluable, and it's going so much better year 2. But the next thing we would implement is that My Ride K-12 app, which not only allows parents to see where the school buses are, but it allows, Shawn, what's the other thing that it allows? See where the school buses are, timing, if they're running late, and so that would actually, we would probably still communicate, but that might, it would be less important to send that communication out because parents would already be able to get a text or a message on that My K-12 app. And then finally, a big area of work that was happening last year, and we've been setting the stage, and that is thinking about multilingual communication. And that really ties into that engagement and partnerships. Tonight you'll hear about the language access plan, and that will move forward for approval next week. That's one of them. We have a new newsletter platform, and board members, hopefully you like your Friday updates because that is on our new newsletter platform. It only took a couple of training sessions before I got the hang of it, but now I am the spokesperson for Frontline, so I feel really positive about that. And then also making sure that as part of that multilingual communication that we have a tool that's on demand so that anyone needs to access a different language has that accessibility. So next steps as we think about our strategic plan. We will continue to work with our departments, and our departments have what we call department improvement plans. It's really a layering. Strategic plans, we have our departments, and then we have our schools. Continuing to work with our schools, our assistant superintendents and those that monitor departments are always working hand in hand, always monitoring and reviewing district data. We will continue to update the district vision card, and then finally providing updates on our district website as it relates to where we're at with strategic planning. With that, I will take any questions and also open up any executive cabinet members who also work on our strategic planning.
Anybody have any questions?
I just have one. Kris, is the Skyward Q like the school district version of like an SAP integration?
Yeah, so it's our ERP, or so it does our finance, payroll, and HR functions is really what the purpose of that particular software. And we were notified by the Skyward company, right, that their goal is to sunset all the Minnesota districts by 2028. And so we know we have kind of a nice long pathway to that. I always joked with Rochester Public Schools that they could go first because they're very similar sized, and they actually are converting a year, kind of this coming July. So I kind of said, thanks for blazing the trail, and we'll kind of piggyback and learn some lessons from them.
And so the idea behind this is that this will both reduce like data errors, but also presumably make your department more efficient, or will require less people hours, maybe?
We'll see. I think, so what I would say is it's similar to any other system change, right? When you change software, even if people have ever used QuickBooks or something, right? It just changes how your work is implemented, really, rather than maybe the work itself and the volume of work, right? So it'll just look different for us. I run reports all the time in Skyward, and I'll be like, oh, let's create a report for this. And that I can't do. It just looks different, the interface does. And so I think for our users, we know that all staff utilize it for their time off, for their checking their paychecks. So they'll be able to, the interface is just a lot more updated and user-friendly. Right now, under the current version, where it's considered SMS is what they call Skyward, the version we're on. And there's actually kind of a web-based version, and then behind the scenes that, and Abby's giggling right now too, but that our benefits team and our HR specialists, payroll, and our finance team utilize that we call it PAC. And I believe it was most recently portrayed to me as, oh, I use the Oregon Trail version, because it really does kind of look a little bit more that-esque. So hoping to join the 21st century a little further and just have some additional functionality. Thanks.
Kris, I can tell you made a connection there because there were a lot of smiles about the Oregon Trail. That was a while ago. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to 5.2, and that is Title IX. On October 9th, Director Clark sent an email to school board members and administrators asking that the Title IX resolution be added to the agenda. Tonight, we will have a discussion around that, and I will hand it over to Ryan.
Thank you, Manager Schwartz. So a little bit of background here. On September 30th, 2025, the Federal Department of Education and the Health and Human Services Department Office for Civil Rights issued address to the Minnesota Department of Education, the Minnesota State High School League, and the Attorney General that Minnesota has been found in violation of Title IX. So the official word or the verbiage here is a letter of violation or letter of notification informing all the districts within Minnesota that we are in violation of Title IX. So I'd like to read a little bit here of what they say. So I guess I'll start down here. So in accordance with the Office for Civil Rights, they have reached the determination using the preponderance of evidence standard that finds to support the conclusion of noncompliance for Title IX. It is further explained that the statute does not discuss gender identity or gender identity discrimination, but one that of sex discrimination. According to the Office of Civil Rights, sex does not mean, nor has it ever meant, gender identity. Title IX and its implementing regulations have never used the term gender identity, let alone define this seemingly unidentifiable term. When recipients of federal funding treat trans-identifying males as if they were females, they defeat the very purpose of Title IX to ensure equal opportunities for women and girls without jeopardizing their privacy, safety, and other rights. Allowing men and boys to compete in women's and girls' sports is demeaning, unfair, and dangerous to women and girls, and denies females the same equal opportunity to participate and excel in competitive sports afforded to males. So this is coming from the federal government. So these are not my words. This is what the federal government is saying. Now, maybe a question for y'all. Have you guys read through this at all? Has anybody on the board read this in its entirety? Because it is about 55 pages of case law, specific examples, multiple districts within our state that are cited in this, from both the Department of Education's perspective and the Department of Health and Human Services perspective. So it is worth, I think, prudent for us to be aware of what this is saying and what this could ultimately mean for us. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to recant or reread all this. We'd be here all night, and you guys don't want that. So basically what it says here at the end, this is kind of the conclusion, the denial of equal opportunity by allowing unfair competitive advantage is evident. This is citing the transgender individual softball pitcher for the recent Class 4A state championships. So it's saying is because our district and all the districts within Minnesota are recipients of federal fund assistance from Health and Human Services, Department of Education, Minnesota Department of Education is obligated to comply with Title IX. When the covered entity receiving funds adopts policies that conflict with federal law, it risks placing itself in violation of federal funding conditions. There's some court cases here that are cited. I won't go through all of them right now. So the Minnesota Department of Education had the choice of accepting or declining to seek federal funds, but since it has accepted federal funds, it is required to comply with Title IX, regardless of Minnesota law. Indeed, federal law must prevail where compliance with both state law and federal law is impossible, or that the state law is an obstacle to the accomplishment and execution of the full purposes and objectives of Congress. Okay? So it is thus a no answer for Minnesota Department of Education to assert that Minnesota state law requires The Minnesota State High School League's policy, MDE's choice to accept federal funds, requires that applicable federal law preempts conflicting state laws. It cites the Constitution here, Article 6, Clause 2. When a state law such as Minnesota's Minnesota Human Rights Act frustrates Congress' purpose and poses an obstacle to the accomplishment of those purposes, that state law is preempted. Okay, so this is what, essentially, this is what the federal government is saying. Okay, so this is their argument. This is all the legal justifications. I think it's worth going to a little bit of background. So we know that Title IX is the Education Amendments of 1972, and that is a federal statute that prohibits sex discrimination in educational institutions receiving federal funds. So that pertains to our district and all of the districts in the state of Minnesota. This is important background for all of us to understand. The Biden administration's Department of Education issued a Title IX final rule on April 24th, 2024. This final rule broadened Title IX protections by using gender identity as a prohibited discrimination on the basis of sex, not success, sorry, expanding the definition of sexual harassment to encompass sex stereotyping, gender identity, and gender expression discrimination, and changes the procedural requirements for investigation and adjudication of complaints. Because of that rule, multiple states sued. In August of 2024, the United States Supreme Court rejected Biden administration request to allow the rules to go into effect. This affected at least 10 states that then sued, meaning these rules were never adopted at state level, at least from the federal government's perspective. Minnesota decided to do its own thing and write its own laws, so that's separate. In January of this year, Kentucky federal court vacated these amended regulations instituted during the Biden administration per the state of Tennessee versus Cardona and returned Title IX to the 2020 foundation. This ruling does apply nationwide, and all of us board members voted to return the Title IX policy to the 2020 version. So the reason why the federal court determined this is they determined that the Department of Education exceeded its authority in expanding the scope of prohibited discrimination to include gender identity. The court rejected the Department of Education's argument that the U.S. Supreme Court decision in Bostock versus Clayton County, Georgia, supports the expanded definition of discrimination on the basis of sex. For the folks who don't know what the Bostock case is, that's a Title VII equal employment opportunity case where employers are not allowed to discriminate on people via gender identity, but what the Biden administration was trying to do is say because it was upheld for Title VII, therefore it will apply to Title IX. That is the crux of what this is. So relying on the plain language of the statute, the federal court determined that when Title IX is viewed in its entirety, it is abundantly clear that discrimination on the basis of sex means discrimination on the basis of being male or female. As the court and others have explained, expanding the meaning on the basis of sex to include gender identity turns Title IX on its head. I'm quoting here. Second, the court determined that the final rule was unconstitutional. The final rule expanded the definition of sex discrimination and sex-based harassment to include conduct that is both objectively and subjectively offensive and either limits or denies the ability to participate in or benefit from an educational opportunity or activity. The court found these new definitions in the final rule would compel Title IX institutions, including school districts, teachers, us, to use names and pronouns associated with a student's gender identity, asserted gender identity, in the violation of the First Amendment. It also found that the new definitions were so vague that recipients of Title IX funds have no way of predicting what conduct would actually violate law. And finally, the court found that the final rule is arbitrary and capricious. The court reasoned that the Department of Education had not provided sufficient basis for its Title IX changes, reiterating that Bostock is a very, I'm quoting here, is a very shaky place for the Department of Education to hang its hat. Okay, so that's the background of all of this. Where are we at now? Idaho passed a state law that prevented trans athletes from competing in sports of the opposite biological sex. In 2020, a trans athlete challenged that law and was successful in getting a federal judge to block the law. And thus, this allowed the trans athlete to compete on the women's team. The Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals upheld the injunction and blocked the law in 2023. This has now been elevated to the U.S. Supreme Court, who has agreed just within the last month or so or less to hear oral arguments in early 2006, roughly the January timeframe. The U.S. Supreme Court has also agreed to hear West Virginia versus BPJ, which is a very similar case. Slight nuance. One of them was a high school student and the other a collegiate student. One of them focuses more so on Title IX, the other on the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause. However, they will be more similar than they are different in this case, most likely when we hear the oral arguments. So I just want to reiterate that this is not about, my view here is not about the trans issue. I'm not taking a stance on the issue of trans. I'm simply saying that because we are in violation, the federal government has found our state, the Minnesota Department of Education, in violation of federal law. Ergo, that puts us at risk because we rely on federal funding. Well, how much federal funding do we rely on? Well, between $8 and $10 million, right? So according to my methods and sources, about 4 million, 3.95 to be exact, I know you appreciate that, of federal funding for Section 419, the Individual Disabilities Education Act, Part B, Section 611. We get about $456,000 per Title I, Part A, academic enhancements for disadvantaged people. For 414, we get about $267,000. That's Title II, Part A, teacher and principal training. 422, or Section 422, we get $225,000. That is for infants and toddler programs. Section 417, about $217,000. Title III, English as a second language or English language support. Section 420, about $75,000. Individuals with Disabilities Education Act Part B, Section 619, preschool. Section 433, $14.4 thousand, Title IV, Part A, student support, and the lunch program, about $3 million, federal lunch assistance. Now, I'm not suggesting or saying that this means that all this stuff will go away, but it is important for us to know and at least acknowledge that this exists. So this is why I asked to bring the resolution forward, and it's just for discussion. And when I prepared the resolution, I thought it was to protect our school district and protect us. So, do we have any questions thus far?
Does anyone have any questions?
Okay.
I have
go
some
through it?
questions.
Sure.
Where did this resolution come from?
I made it up.
So where would you send it if, since it wasn't a legal document, it wasn't anywhere, where does it go if this board would pass it?
I would assume as the chair you would have the answer.
That would not, I would not, because I did not create this document, nor would I know who to send it. If it gets that far, yes, but what I'm asking is where does it go then?
That's a good question. Where does it go?
That's you.
We should send it to the Minnesota Department of Education. We should send it to the Minnesota State High School League, and we should send it to Attorney General Ellison.
And you have all the contact information of who that would go to?
I do.
Okay. I do have one question for you, Kris. Have we lost any federal funding based on this?
So as of for 25-26, the current year that we're in, we've received all the federal funds to which we're currently entitled. So as we know, there's annual allocations,
So we have not?
No,
We have
for
not.
25-26, not.
Okay, and then Superintendent Nielson, have we actually received anything stating that we are in violation of any?
I have not received anything. I think the board was made aware of legal counsel's advice around Title IX, and that really is the only information that I have, and that nothing has changed since that time.
Okay, so we have not, as a district, been sent anything stating that we are in violation.
So it's
Okay.
worth pointing out that it's not per individual school district. It's for the Department of Education, of which we receive funds from. So the federal funding doesn't come directly to our district unless I'm mistaken, Kris. My understanding is it goes to the Minnesota Department of Education, which then disseminates it out to the various districts. So it doesn't have to come to Independent School District 833 specifically for it to not, it still affects us.
But we have received all our, my question was if we received all our. Okay, if no one else has any other questions, then we'll start with our comments. Sharon?
I do have a question, actually, sorry.
Okay.
Do we know, is there any timeline for potential consequences, I guess, if the Minnesota State High School League and Minnesota Department of Education don't, I guess, come into compliance with this?
I wish I had an answer, but because the government shut down, I don't think we know.
Okay.
Okay, so Sharon?
Well,
Since we have not received a letter, I've been listening to our Attorney General, Keith Ellison, and he has issued statements that that is conducive to discrimination, that it's against the law or against our laws that discrimination is prohibited. The Minnesota Human Rights prohibits discrimination based on any of the constitution of criteria that we follow. Whether in compliance with the executive order or not, we haven't received anything stating that we are in violation. The Court of Appeals decision reflects a sound policy. Whether the court's appeal decision is immoral, it was not based on that. It was based on law. So our role is to support the decision of the laws that exist. Whether we agree or disagree with the Minnesota Court of Appeals decision, the Court of Appeals decision is the law of Minnesota, and it is binding for all Minnesota schools. So that's where I stand.
So as a part of this, I would also like each board member, after they give their input, to share if they are in favor of moving it to the next board meeting for a vote, or if they are opposed to moving it forward.
I am opposed.
Before we move on, I want
Okay,
to point
I am
something
going
out. This
to-
is not about executive order. So this has nothing to do with President Trump's executive order. No, you had mentioned the executive order. This is, we are found in discrimination per the Civil Rights Act of 1972, Title IX. That's what this says. Has nothing to do with Trump's executive order at all. Just want to point that out.
Okay, at this time, each board member is going to have an opportunity to speak. So I am going to read Louise, since she could not be here. She said, I appreciate the legal information our district's attorney shared with us about Title IX. Under federal law, court decisions across the country have been consistent in stating Title IX protects transgender students according to their gender identity. The decision of the Minnesota Court of Appeals states that transgender students have the right to access facilities and participate in activities that align with their gender identity. Not complying with these laws opens our district to significant financial and legal risks that do not benefit our students or community, and we need to comply with current law. That is from Louise. Simi?
Sure. So when I joined the board, the sort of the overarching message I remember in my first training from Mick, our lawyer, was that our obligation as a school district, as school district board members, school board members, is to follow the law, and that we have to follow the law of Minnesota. And there are a few ways where Minnesota law and federal law come into conflict. Like marijuana is legal in Minnesota. It is not legal federally. The minimum wage in Minnesota is several dollars an hour more than it is federally, and we have to pay Minnesota minimum wage. We don't get to pay $7 and change per hour. And so what that says to me is that when Minnesota law and federal law are not the same, our obligation is we follow Minnesota law. We are in Minnesota. The lawyer, I appreciate what you said about this having nothing to do with Trump's executive order. When I read Mick's email, he talked about how this wasn't really an executive order. This was an interpretation of Title IX by this current administration. And so I did a little Google looking myself, not to the extent that you have done. And it turns out that every administration has a different interpretation of Title IX. And so what that says to me is that in 2028 or 2029, when we get a new president, whoever it is, there's going to be a different interpretation of Title IX. And so it seems more prudent for us to look at sort of historical precedent and not change with the whims of whoever happens to be in office. And as our lawyer pointed out, executive branch interpretation does not carry the force of law. And to Sharon's point, Minnesota law is super duper clear, and I don't want us to end up like Anoka Hennepin, where we discriminate against a trans student and we have to pay several $100,000 in fines. I don't want, plus legal fees to our lawyers, because I'm certain Mick will not work for free. We cannot violate students' rights. It's just plain and simple. And this is generally speaking, this is a high-profile topic. If we violate students' rights, we will get sued. I don't think as a board member, I would rather spend our taxpayer money on teachers or paras or bus drivers or nutrition services or paper for the copier or whatever than to spend it on a lawsuit or in a legal settlement. And you know, inviting a lawsuit is a waste of taxpayer dollars. It's a waste of all of our tax dollars. Well, not Shawn, who lives in Stillwater, but the rest of us. Poor Shawn catching strays. And so for these reasons, I do not support any further discussion.
Okay, Linda?
Yeah, I have written in my notes everything you just said, basically. But yeah, so I think it's important that, you know, we comply with the well-established Minnesota state law, that we listen to our attorney, and we don't risk having litigation like Anoka Hennepin School District did several years back. It's important that also that we follow our strategic plan as much as we can, which has to do with integrity and equity for all students. So I do not support this.
Eric?
I could be wrong here, but I think you guys are potentially missing the point of this letter. The goal here is not to vote on, are we going to go against Minnesota law, or are we going to try to go our own path as far as what we do with trans athletes. The point of sending this letter is to urge the Minnesota State High School League and the Minnesota Department of Education and the Minnesota Education leadership to review their laws and what they're doing as far as biological males and women's sports, okay? That's all this letter does, is to urge them to review the laws that they have passed and the policies that they have passed that have been found to be in contradiction with the federal Department of Education. So that's all this letter does. It doesn't mean that if we push this forward to vote on it and we vote hypothetically yes on it, that all of a sudden all of our policies in 833 change. That's not the point of this. So I just want everybody to understand that because that's a huge distinction. So we're not, I don't know, I just want everybody to understand that because it seems like there's a misunderstanding of the whole purpose of this letter. Okay, there was a large consortium of school board members across the state that essentially wanted to, and this is how this got started, that wanted to acknowledge that the federal government has determined that the state of Minnesota is in violation of Title IX, okay? And we wanted to, or Ryan wanted to, essentially do something to urge our state leaders to get in compliance with Title IX because of the financial implications or consequences that may filter down to our school district itself. All right, and we don't know what the timeline for that is. That's why I asked. But potentially there could be implications for it in the future. We don't know. And it really starts with the top of the leadership in the state of Minnesota. It doesn't start with our school district. It starts with the educational leadership in the state of Minnesota. So for that reason, yes, I would like to see the letter get pushed forward for a vote.
Okay, Ryan?
That's exactly right. This is not about going against Minnesota law or going against our own policies. This is simply, whereas the Independent School District 833 Board affirms its commitment to providing all students with opportunities to participate in school athletics in a manner that is safe and respectful of both competitive fairness and individual dignity. And whereas Title IX and long-established athletic policy frameworks were designed to protect equal athletic opportunities of biological females in sex-separated sports, and whereas our community has expressed significant concern about preserving competitive integrity in girls' sports by ensuring clear eligibility criteria for sex-specific teams and events, and where Minnesota State High Schools League current policy has created situations where biological males may compete in girls' sports, resulting in a loss of competitive opportunities, scholarship, safety, and advancement of biological females, and whereas local school boards currently have no formal process for input into the creation or amendment of Minnesota State High School League eligibility rules, despite bearing responsibility for representing the interests and values of our local community, And whereas the United States Department of Education and Health and Human Services have formally found the Minnesota Department of Education and the Minnesota State High School League in violation of Title IX, and whereas a federal investigation concluded that Minnesota's policy of allowing participation in girls' sports based on gender identity rather than biological sex constitutes unlawful discrimination against biological females and denies them equal athletic opportunity. So what this is basically saying is this is where people are coming from. It's not about going against state law. It's not about discriminating against people or trying to prevent discrimination that's already occurring. And basically we're saying we want the state to rectify this. So Eric's point is spot on. I'm not saying let's be rogue and go against state law. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is we should be asking our state leadership, like, hey, you guys need to get your proverbial stuff together so that we as a district know what to do. Because we're essentially caught in, we're violating the law in one way or the other, depending on which way you look at it, right?
So,
we don't, hold on, and we don't want to have to be responsible for, that's not our job as school board members to have to decide all that stuff. We are not legislators. But this could affect our school district. It already affects the girls playing sports, and that's not fair for them either. And it's not fair for the trans kids. It's not fair for anybody. So maybe we should, I don't know, push this forward and say, we want you guys, leadership, our leaders in the state, to make a decision about what this means. How are we going to comply with federal law? Or maybe we just stop taking federal funding and then we don't have to bother. And then that's an option too. So I would like to see it at least discussed. And if we want to amend this, if other board members feel that there's something inappropriate about this, or if something in my resolution adds undue risk or burden to our district, I'm happy to have a discussion. We can amend it. It doesn't have to go with the exact verbiage I have right here, but it's at least to get the conversation started. That's why I brought it forward, and thank you for your time.
Okay, so I am against bringing it forward because I do know what this is saying, and I do understand what it's saying, and I think Minnesota has been very clear on their stance on this. I don't think doing this is actually, it says right here, to immediately revise and review the transgender athlete participation policy. So we are going to urge the state to change their policy and their procedures and their law, and I'm currently in agreement with their current laws. So I don't agree with bringing this forward. Also, the fact that Director Clark did not know where this would even go had it been brought forward does not put a lot of weight for me into that this is something we should do. So at this time, we do not have a majority to move it forward, so it will not move forward to the November 20th business meeting for a vote. And we will move on now to 6.0, and that is our information items. 6.1 is a financial update, and that will be presented by Kris Blackburn, Director of Business Services.
Ooh, Shawn still has the clicker. I'm just excited I don't have to click and. So thank you this evening. Tonight, as you know, each month we bring a financial update, and tonight's focus is really kind of twofold. It's a little bit of a little glimpse into our 24-25 preliminary financial results, as well as just kind of a little talk about how we're looking for the current year. So diving right into the 24-25 preliminary financial results, and on the revenue side, we were within 1.8% of budget, so we came in just slightly above. Just a reminder that we have more than 1,000 lines across all the funds, and so sometimes when we're talking about what that looks like, I always teased my old predecessor that I did better on him on expenditures because there's more lines. But to that end, so just a graphical, tried to move a little bit more to some visualizations tonight instead of just a lot of numbers and sometimes to not make anybody fall asleep. So basic state formula, I'll point that out again, that is by far our biggest driver of revenue for any school district in Minnesota, but so no different here. And so we came in real close to budget. State special education, and so you'll see the blue is the revised budget and the red is the actual amounts. state special education. As you recall, during revised budget season, at that point, the state was talking about prorating our state special education aid. And so we chose to budget a conservative amount for that, and they actually did not prorate that aid, so we received our full entitlement. And so that largely accounts for that difference there. Other state aids, you know, always sometimes a little bit, there's some levy and aid mixes, and so within that, some things come in, we get a little more aid maybe than we perhaps anticipated right away, and so that came in slightly higher. Our federal dollars is actually our lowest amount, just pertinent to this conversation this evening, our lowest amount of revenue, but again, we came in right close to budget on those. Local property taxes, another significant source, and we're always thankful for our community that's been so supportive to for our operating levy in particular, and so that came in right at budget. And then again, local other, and we generally budget a little conservative there. That's largely interest, dues, participation fees, admissions to events. So if you attend a theater event or a you know, football or volleyball or basketball, hockey, any of those, that would fall into there too. But typically interest in this case is the driver of that difference. So again, a nice little pie graph, and this is why I point out the state basic formula when we look at the 24-25 actual, and I'll say preliminary results. We just wrapped up audit last week, so I always am hesitant to say these are final because we're still wrapping that up. So, but that basic formula state is 42.1% of our actual revenues from last year. Why that's important, when we talk about receiving 2.74% increase for 25-26 on our state aid, that's the portion of which we receive that 2.74. So sometimes when we're looking at those numbers, and we know when we get to the expenditure side, we'll see that significance of salary and benefits. That 2.74 is just on that 42% of our revenue. State special education, just wanting to point that out, the significance of that in our budget. And again, that's a reimbursement, so it's based on prior year expenditures largely. And then the other most significant there is that property tax piece. And again, that's 25.4% on actual last year. So again, just reflective of that support in our community that we're extremely grateful for. So on the next slide is the expenditures. So we'll transition, and pleased to tell you that we were within, I'll let Simi cough for a moment, that we were within 0.5% of budget. And so we have over 15,000 lines across all funds. And so to be that close, we always take a tremendous sense of pride and utmost respect to my team, Nikki Kazel, and the rest of the finance department, who largely, particularly with that salaries and benefits piece. So you'll see that we came in just slightly under on salaries, a little bit under on benefits. Services, we came in a little higher, so I tell people it's kind of like the Price is Right. We hope to come in close without going over, and that one went in slightly over, largely due to transportation in that category. The contracted transportation is always a little challenging just to determine exactly what our need might look like the following year. Supplies, we came in just slightly under. Capital almost spot on, maybe just slightly over, and other is dues and memberships and such like that. It's a real small part, almost spot on. I'll comment on the benefit side that with mid-year elections, so we actually have open enrollment going on right now. So I know Abby and her and the benefits team are working diligently to get everybody enrolled. I know I have mine yet to do, so I'll get that done, Abby. But with that mid-year enrollment particularly, it's always a little bit of a challenge to just predict what people will do for benefit elections. And so even a revised budget, we try to capture that, and sometimes we get a little closer than other years. TSA elections, if people decide to put more away into retirement, which we hope people do make that choice, but those always impact that number. So on the next slide, we look at the 24-25 actual, and again, just point out as to the significance of that salary and benefits. So it's 76.6% of our actual expenditures was on salary and benefits. So we really invest heavily in our people. So whether that's custodians, teachers, the people around this space, our office professionals, bus drivers, there's just nutrition services. I think there's just, well, maybe not them because they're not in this fund, as I said it, but they're, again, just that reminder of that investment in our people, again, because then that directly impacts the students. So the most significant of that would be our teaching group, just as far as number of staff, but again, that 76.6%. On this slide then is the fund balance. Right now that, I'll kind of color-coded a little bit here, and Shawn probably was like, oh geez, Kris, color-coding. So the green is the historical information. This does also show projected, so the blue is the current year projected. The red shows based on current year original budget, and then the gray is kind of as we look to the year following. So historical and projected on fund balance, this really just so to caution on this slide is unrestricted fund balance. And I point that out because we know that the state does have various restricted funds that we also receive. We know board policy is based on unrestricted fund balance, and so that board policy, as a reminder, is 16.6. And I do anticipate that we'll be, again, we'll have met that board policy goal again for this year, so pleased at that. But as we look forward, we know that as we look for enrollment, which will be on my next slide, we'll talk about that. But just to note that those red and gray numbers are both just projections at this point. So as we talk for current year, so we'll transition to current year and enrollment. We speak about, and sometimes people might say, oh, Kris, enrollment again? But yes, it drives our revenue. So we, as of October 28th, so last week, we have the K-12 count was 18,815, and we're projected right now to be just slightly under budget. And so we'll continue to monitor that as we move forward through the spring. 84 students, as a reminder, is equal to about $1 million in our budget, and that we are paid based on actual average daily student count. So as students attend classes and things like that, or they move in or out of the district, we're paid on that average daily count, and that those counts are finalized the next fall. And so right now, I know Tricia and her team kind of have wrapped up the most significant portion of the work in student information system for this past year, and then they're kind of just cleaning up the data just a little bit yet. So it is kind of that leg in that cleanup. So again, color coding, the green is the historical, the blue is where we anticipate 24-25 to land, and the red is our projected budget, what we utilized for budget on, and then the gray is projected numbers for enrollment. And so you'll see that that trend kind of, we go kind of ticked up a little bit. Last year was our highest enrollment ever, and we know this year we're kind of projected to just be a little bit above that, and then we'll anticipating to decline some. And we know that we have a growing community, which we're also thankful for, but we also recognize that with those lower class sizes coming in, with those kindergartners, those low birth rates are impacting that. I looked back the past several years, and we've lost about, I'll say just attrition-wise. So think graduating senior class, the next year incoming kindergartners. It's been about 200 students gap. So we graduated 200 more than we've received into the system. And so that naturally, as it flows through the cycle all the way up, and we continue that pattern, it's kind of increasing in future years. And then we also know that with enrollment options, we'll start to see some of that decline. And so just trying to make sure that we can get in front of that and mitigate that however we're able to. Again, for 25-26, so the things we're watching, just a reminder that preliminary budget was approved with a nearly $2 million budget deficit. And so we knew going into this year that we had projected a deficit at the, as was approved in June. Enrollment, again, we're looking at slightly lower than projected this time. Not significant, but just again that we'll continue to monitor. Interest income, I do highlight that only because I highlighted that we had come in a little above last year, and so we know that the Federal Reserve just cut rates again, and so we'll continue to monitor that just to ensure that we didn't get too maybe aggressive on that as well. Expenditures we'll continue to monitor and make adjustments wherever possible as well, or if there's things that make sense to. Again, with the significant portion in staff, there's some of those, a lot of that is set cost, but we'll continue to monitor. Salaries and benefits, that reminder again, that 70 as a budget percentage, it actually is 78% of general fund budgeted expenditures for the 25-26 school year. So the exciting future dates. So truth in taxation, which I think, I believe again my predecessor used to call the Super Bowl of finance, is on December 11th. So our board meeting in December will be the truth in taxation hearing. At that same meeting, we will seek board approval for the final tax levy. The audit presentation, Aaron Nielson of LB Carlson will be here in January. Typically, he attends the workshop meeting, so to allow a little more discussion in January. In December, so starting already, we'll just right around the corner, we'll start planning for budget for next school year for the 26-27, and then we'll move right into staffing as well. I know, Abby, we already have a bit of a timeline already set, and so we'll be working towards that. In March next year, we'll bring the 25-26 revised budget. We'll bring that forward for board approval. And then next June, we'll be talking already about the 26-27. So just 7 months away, we'll be here talking about the preliminary budget for next year. With that, any questions?
Does anyone have any questions?
All right.
Hi, Kris. Thank you so much for this. So one, I do want to say, like, looking at the preliminary financial results slide, it's so pretty. And I really want to thank everyone in Executive Cabinet for how diligent you've been on trying to ensure that we get to our fund balance and keep, at that 16.6 level. I know it's a lot of work, and I know it's kind of thankless work, and it's not fun work, but I appreciate it. And so one of the things that, I look at is for 26, 27, there's a fairly significant decline in what our fund balance might be, right? And so I know we went out for a levy in 2021. And I remember at the time when we were talking, we said that we wanted to go as long as possible before we go back out to taxpayers, right? And so, but then we also know that we are trying to settle all these contracts, and we want to pay people as well as we possibly can. So given those two sort of like tensions, right, that I laid out, when do you think we would have to start looking at potentially a new budget adjustment process or thinking about how we're going to manage our budget longer term?
Right, that's a really great question. So I think as we look, knowing that we have some expansion in the charter school world and just different enrollment options sometimes for students, we know that this next year will really be, I'll say kind of a bellwether of what that might look like. We know there's a lot of uncertainty, and so we were a little hesitant to get too far ahead of it and make some adjustments that perhaps were a little more challenging when maybe we need not have either. And so I think we've always been really good at making sure that we're fiscal stewards of taxpayer money, and I think we'll continue to do so. That said, I think certainly as we look forward, so, Julie and I have a lot of conversations about can we get to 2031? We know that we'll have the opportunity to do a one-time renewal via board approval if so chosen, and that would be at that same level. If we wanted to maybe seek voter approval for additional funds, right now we're about $225 under the cap as of today, and that changes each year, so we'll continue to monitor that. Is there? I would say right now, our goal is still to get to 2031, and so certainly capital projects levy, it might be too that we know technology as we continue to just have a need on the system for those type of not only devices and supports and the tools that our teachers need, but also the staff to support those needs. So I think that would be another opportunity. And again, I think, Simi, our goal is really to not go back out if we're able to, but certainly be ahead of those things and also to make those budget adjustments. I would suspect a year from now we'll know a lot better and be looking at a process for that, very likely, because at that point we should have a much better sense for what that enrollment and what type of adjustments may be needed.
Awesome, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Kris. Okay, we'll move on to 6.2, and that is our language access plan, and that will be presented by Dr. Meghan Hickey, Executive Director of Student Support Services, and Shawn Hogendorf, Director of Communications.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here tonight to talk, and Shawn is here to answer any hard questions that you might have about our language access plan. We started sharing this with you this summer, and we're here today to share our completed plan. Okay, so the core purpose of this plan is really simple, but it's critical. It's equal, equitable access for each and every family. Our plan details how Sawashko schools will ensure that every family can receive information about their students' education, regardless of the language that they speak or read. And it isn't just about compliance, it's really about creating partnerships with all of the families that we serve. Our goals are really to increase family participation in their education and make sure that all of our families feel welcomed, included, and valued. Our plan also helps to standardize our operational procedures within our school district so that the process is consistent and reliable across all of our school buildings. We also seek to make sure that all of our employees are aware of our language resources and have the training to use our resources. And finally, we seek to create systems for feedback so that we can continuously improve and serve our families and our community better. So what's included in our plan that we have here tonight? It includes our commitments to our families and their rights. We define words commonly used in our language access plan so that it's accessible to people. We define how families' preferred language is identified and how that information is used. We're sharing information about how we use interpreters and translators and when it is appropriate to rely on our multilingual staff. We're sharing resources on training for our SoWashco staff so that we can communicate with multilingual families. And we're also providing information around evaluation and improvement opportunities related to our language access plan. So you might be asking, why is this needed? And we talked a little bit about that related to our strategic plan earlier this evening. Our school district is made up of families who speak and read more than 80 languages. Since July 1st of 2025, our school district has welcomed more than 125 new-to-country families. That's over 125 families navigating new school systems, a new culture, and often a new language. We've had more than 400,000 words translated on our website to ensure access and information is available 24/7. We've utilized more than 5,700 minutes of interpretation from qualified interpreters through our language line. That's over 95 hours of direct, real-time communication and support for meetings, conferences, and phone calls. So Washco schools use a variety of services to provide both interpretation and translation to our families and community members. We offer in-person, phone, and video call interpretation. We have a number of multilingual staff who are able to deliver informal interpretations to our families. We also use a Minnesota-based professional translation service for our formal and some of our information document translations. Our website uses Wegalot, is that the right? Okay, close, to translate into 7 languages. Our district newsletter and most of our school newsletters are translated automatically. Educators are also able to use different software to communicate with families in their preferred language. We also have a paid artificial intelligence translation program for informal and crisis communications. Related to staff resources and support, currently all staff have access and will receive training opportunities regarding Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination based on race, color, or national origin. We'll train folks on how to work effectively with interpreters, including how to write using plain language so that it can be translated more clearly. We'll train on cultural understanding related to the delivery of information and on services to provide students receiving English language services. Finally, we'll be looking at equipment and resources available to all staff to communicate with our multilingual families. By communicating with families in their preferred language, we'll allow them to participate in their children's education more effectively. When we remove language as a barrier, we empower families to be active participants in their children's education. That means more families at conferences, at PTA meetings, and engaging with our teachers. It also helps send a tangible message to our families that everyone belongs here. This feeling of trust is really foundational to everything we do. And most importantly, this leads to improved student outcomes. When families are engaged and feel welcomed, students have better attendance, they have higher academic achievement, and they have stronger well-being. Thank you so much, and Shawn is ready for any questions that you may have.
Anybody have any questions?
I did have one question, and I actually pre-fed it to Nikki in the hallway because I ran into her. But I was hoping you could explain some of the outreach that we do to multilingual families so that they understand kind of their resources that are available to them.
You get the first hard question.
Okay, all right. Good evening. Yes, I am happy to talk a little bit about that with you. We've done a variety of things. So one thing to just remember is that we're just one department, and our priority has really been to put processes and procedures in place that schools and our community partners can help us with this work. We have implemented newcomer meetings at the elementary schools that have been very successful to engage families in the building learning and understanding just the culture of school. And another thing that we have done is partner with community ed, and a lot of the events that are happening right now, our Warm Coat event has been hugely successful and well attended by our multilingual families. And then just the continual outreach with our EL teachers and just having that representation on numerous district and school committees, and it's been helpful. Did that answer your question?
That was great. Yeah,
Okay.
I really appreciate that. That was honestly my only question. I was going to say I read the plan and I was really excited to see it kind of laid out in black and white. Like, here's where you use an interpreter. Here's where you can use, you know, someone who speaks Spanish in the front office or whatever, right? And so I just appreciated that how clear it was. Shawn, I did have one question for you. We had talked somewhere. I had seen that there's some like wait time for doing translations and stuff when we go to that company.
Inco?
Ingo, yeah, in Edina, there's like, you know, it's not like you can send it and then you get it back, you know, in an hour or whatever. Like, has that turned into an issue, or have we have had ample, like people have had ample time to get turnaround on what they've needed to have translated?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we talk about translation services, we oftentimes say we need a week, right? So that's what we ask for in that. When there's a crisis letter, and it would absolutely be necessary, it's an increased cost, right? So I can get it back in an hour, depending on, right, that's a 500-word document or something like that, right? If it's 15 pages, it's going to take a minute, right? But I would say that they are great. They really are. Most things about a day, maybe a 1 to 3 day turnaround, and those are not crisis related. Those are not big things. Those are things that are within 3 to 5 pages or something like that. A flyer is quick. So we have not had that problem, to be succinct in my answer to you, but if we needed it really quickly, it would just be an increased cost.
Okay. And so how have our families received kind of this plan? I'm assuming the implementation of this plan is happening now. So I know that we've been doing a lot of this work before, but how have our families received it sort of now that it's more formalized?
Yes, so the and then just within our team, the outreach, the calls to families, just to explain some of the school processes and how they can access anybody in the district is really what we've been working on.
And that way we will have a website, we will have it in the PDF that you see here. We'd put that in our family newsletter. We'd bring that out to our family ambassadors and send it out to our schools that way, to also put in their school newsletters and things like that. So we would push it with all of the ways that we do disseminate everything else. We're just waiting to make sure that you didn't have any suggested changes or updates or things like that we'd want. So once it's final, then we would get into that dissemination of it.
Great, thank you so much.
Any other questions? I just more had a comment. I think the district does a great job of welcoming families and having them be as involved as they would like to be. And this is just another way that we're really making sure that we are reaching everybody and being really inclusive of all of our families. So I appreciate the work. Okay, on to 6.3, and that is our academic calendar 2026-27, and that will be presented by Julie Nielson, Superintendent.
Thank you, and thank you to our community who's patient, because I know that you wanted this calendar about 2 or 3 years ago. So people in the audience, if you want a copy of the calendar, it is over here. We don't have slides up in the space this evening, so please feel free to grab a copy on the table. But maybe just to summarize a little bit, when you think about the school calendar, first of all, we have a steering committee that works on drafting that calendar. That steering committee is made up of executive cabinet members, representatives from our departments, as well as professional development. We have membership from our United Teachers of South Washington County Schools, our Student Information Department. We have an athletic and activity director, and of course, principals from various levels. Our steering committee met twice. I think what we found over time is there are only so many ways that you can adjust the calendar when there's a set number of days that students need to go to school and teachers and staff need to work. So this evening you're going to see that. You're going to note that according to considerations, all schools must end the school year by June 30th. We have 165 days of instruction. And when we count those days, it also is a matter of seat time from the state. And then finally, our current teacher contract requires 183 duty days. So as we take a look at the calendar, and we have had neighboring school districts that have done different things, we are continuing to have an after Labor Day start. And so we know that by starting later, more than likely that's going to push us into the middle of June. So with an after Labor Day start, you'll see that our first full day for all students would be September 9th. That September 8th day would again be used for onboarding let me think here, 6th graders and 9th graders, and elementary would have that assessment day. The rest of the month of September looks almost identical to this year's calendar with that ATPPS day on September 28th. As we roll into the month of October, just to point out October 14th, that day was slightly changed, and on October 14th, our middle school students, that will be a student contact day. I believe this year it was a professional development day. So that will be adjusted to be a student contact day, along with 10th and 11th graders who will be in school. And then you're going to see 9th and 12th graders on that day, because of testing, would be asynchronous learning. The remainder of October looks similar. We again on November 3rd would have no school due to an election day. And that will be a general election. And then November 26th and 27th would be off for holiday. And then some may look at the month of December and wonder, why are we having a teacher workshop day on the 4th? Because of the start of the school year, we actually had to extend that first trimester. So first trimester won't end until December 3rd. In past calendars, it actually ended right before Thanksgiving. And so this extends it a little bit. And we did talk about that opening trimester and the importance of making sure that we have equal days to trimester 2 and 3. Some of that is because you're just getting to know students and they're just getting back into the groove during that first trimester. So you see that workshop. Perhaps a slightly condensed winter break with students being in session December 22nd and then arriving back in January on January 5th. Much of January and then February looks similar. We have a professional development day in February. March 12th, you're going to see that Purple Day, and that is a teacher workshop day, and that marks the end of trimester 2. Then our spring break, March 15th through the 19th. And then for the remainder of the year, it looks very similar. You're going to note April 20th is a testing day. It's really difficult. One of the considerations we have breaking up kind of that last 2 months of school is that professional development day in May. And what we found with AP testing, it's really difficult. The schedule isn't posted yet, so we're not sure when that AP testing is going to occur. So right now, we've kept that professional development day in April, or on April 16th. And then our last day of school for K-12 would be June 9th. You'll see then that there is an ATPPS day and then a final workshop day that we would wrap up the school year June 11th. With that, any questions about the proposed calendar?
Any questions?
So, I mean, I don't know that this is necessarily a question so much as a comment, and I know that there's probably not anything that we can do about it, but I really don't love first trimester ending after Thanksgiving, just because I know from having a high schooler, or I guess I've had multiple high schoolers at this point, and maybe you guys, actually this would be a great opportunity for, I would love to hear what our students have to think about this. I know one of the things I've really appreciated about how our calendars have worked thus far is that finals happen like Monday, Tuesday of Thanksgiving week, then you're off, you don't have to think, no one, like, you know, not even your Calc BC teacher is assigning homework for that weekend, you know, and then you get to spring break and you take your finals, you know, and then you get to go on spring break and you have nothing, you know, and it's just, I think it's a really excellent time for our high schoolers to have like an actual proper decompression, mental health break, where they're not worried about, you know, oh, I got to lug you know, chemistry textbook with me to wherever, to grandma's house or whatever. And so, like, I understand how time works, right? But I really struggle with this one specific piece just because I think our children deserve to have like an actual break and not just, I don't know, this I struggle with a little bit, but, you know, that being said.
And Abby, I want to say that was a conversation we had. We originally had as a committee, everybody's shaking their head, we originally had as a committee that day before Thanksgiving, so the 25th. And I think by contract, it needs to be at the end of a trimester. Is that correct? Yeah, the teacher workday has to be at the end of a trimester. But I think we completely hear what you're saying. It is really nice for our kids. And kids, we would love to hear you. Do you agree with Simi? Yeah. Having that time to even have 2 days where you don't have to think about finals.
Any other questions or comments?
I just noticed that the spring break is a week later than normal. What was the reasoning for that?
Because school starts so late. We can start before Labor Day if y'all want. Everything will get pushed back a week.
I think that is the ever ongoing debate, and we've heard other districts that have gone before Labor Day, and we certainly discussed that. And I think when people went out and got feedback, the majority of feedback came back starting after Labor Day. So I will be bringing the calendar forward next meeting for a final approval, and then we will get it posted because we know that people are already calling Dana and wanting to know what that spring break and other dates look like.
Can I offer one piece of constructive advice?
Sure.
On the page after the calendar, is it possible to make the font bigger? It's not.
Already asked.
Oh, really?
No, only because it doesn't fit, because it's in a Google spreadsheet. And so to save it to a PDF.
Girl, I'm gonna bring a magnifying glass in.
Maybe we can work on a different platform, Shawn. Right?
So when it does go to families, it is larger and it is more user-friendly, for sure.
Thank you. Some of us have terrible middle-aged eyes.
Simi, we're always open to good feedback like that.
Okay, on to our last information item, and that is 6.4, and that is the first reading of proposed policy changes. That will also be presented by Julie Nielson, Superintendent.
So I'm thinking back to the strategic planning, people talking, understanding policies and how they work, and I think we've all tried to be so intentional. This evening, I'm bringing forward 10 policies that have been reviewed and revised to reflect updates. Our board policy committee met and made some of those adjustments, and they're reflected in your packets this evening. Our current board policies are located online underneath school board, and right there are all of our policies. Those policies come forward to the board in a cycle. Some are reviewed annually, and others are reviewed every 2 years or every 3 years. And then following my conversation around policies, there will be an opportunity to address the board regarding any of the policies presented this evening. Also, just to communicate, as I'm educating our students, all of our policies are in series. So tonight we'll be covering policy in series 200, which is related to school board. In the 700 series, it's business services, and our 800 series policies are school facilities and grounds. So to start out with our 200 series, school board committees, there was added language just clarifying the role of school board members as it relates to advisory committees. Policy 704, development and maintenance of an inventory of fixed assets and a fixed asset accounting system. There were updates to the statute, and that was a change in dollar amounts as per Kris. And then we hop into the 800 series, which are school facilities and grounds. 801, equal access to school facilities for students. There were no suggested changes. 801.4, the policy was conducting bond campaigns, and there is no MSBA model policy, and so the recommendation from the committee is that it would be deleted and that there would just be a procedure if we were to ever hold another bond campaign. 802, disposition of obsolete equipment and materials. There was a section added on disposing of surplus books. 805, waste reduction and recycling. There were no suggested changes. 806.2, buildings and grounds security. There were no suggested changes. 806.3, insurance recovery and replacement. There is no MSBA model policy, and so the recommendation from the committee was to delete the policy and create a procedure. Next, 806.4, parking, traffic, and safety controls on district property. There were no suggested changes to that, as well as no suggested changes to 807, health and safety.
Does anyone have any questions or comments regarding the policies? Okay, seeing none, this will come forward at our next business meeting. Oh, wait, sorry, are there any? No. Okay, this will come forward at our next business meeting for a vote. Okay, 7.0 is reports and comments. Superintendent Nielson?
Thank you. Our students covered our two upcoming plays. I'm there the tomorrow, Mean Girls, and then Matilda the following Friday. So looking forward to it. I've heard wonderful things. Mean Girls is already in its second week. Also a reminder, we have a November 18th All-District Advisory, and that is where we have our parents and community members who are representative on our 9 advisories come together. And then finally, I want to just say a few words about graduation. Because I know that there are many people kind of sitting on their edge of their seats wondering, what are we going to do about graduation? And obviously with the news from the University of Minnesota, it threw many school districts for a loop. And Christina's shaking her head because she is working right now on trying to track down that location that will hold the amount of people we need. What we do know for this year, and we continue to hear a lot of feedback of, why don't you just have it on your fields, or why don't you have it in your gymnasiums? And what we know for this coming year is right now we're struggling with parking for our students, that we know we just don't have the space to host graduations on our home sites right now. So that being said, there are a couple options out there. You know, following the announcements, we did have some different locations reach out to us. We are hopeful in the next couple of weeks we will have a date selected, and then we will begin communication once we have that done.
Any board members have any events to report? Okay, then we move on to 8.0, and that is our future meeting dates. November 20th, 2025 is a school board business meeting here at the District Service Center at 6 p.m. And then December 11th is also a school board business meeting here at the District Service Center at 6 p.m. We do only have one board meeting in December, and then 9.0, and we are adjourned.